everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of Future Proof PT. Alex and I are here with our special guest, Kylie Williams. And without further ado, I'm going to have Kylie introduce herself to our guests.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Kylie, and I have the unique and special privilege of not only being a physical therapy assistant, also, I've transitioned into non-clinical work, and now I consider myself a sociologist or a psychologist of the industry because now I market as a vendor to you all. So I see a little bit what's behind the curtain, see a lot more challenges, and I know now what a typical private practice business looks like and what they need to know to be operationally sound and be profitable in these harder times.
Wow.
You're a unique guest to bring onto the podcast with a different perspective, Kylie. And for any of those who are receiving our newsletters, and if you aren't, please do. Kylie has published a couple of articles for us, and we have her doing a 5 or 6 blog series. The latest one was last week, and it's entitled Stop Posting for Patients, Start Posting for Therapists. So we'll start off with if you could share a little bit about your article and what inspired it and what you would want folks to know so that they then go ahead and read the article themselves.
Yes, thank you. The gist of the article is that as someone who's looking on the outside and who does a lot of industry trends, there is kind of a bad habit in the I want to say the private practice space, but it still also applies to larger health systems, is there is a group think, and when a certain individual or business has like a little bit of success, they all want to join in on it. And so over the last like decade, in the past, there were a few names that got a lot of patients by posting social media videos. And maybe there's only 3 that have reached millions of followers, but the average physical therapy clinic, if you're in the highest 1%, you're over 30,000 followers across all platforms. But the typical um like clinic is around 500 to 2,000 followers. And so they're spending all this extra time having their PT aides, their PTAs, and even some of their clinicians like churning out content because that's what they're told. Oh, if you want more patients, you got to be on social media. When really patients aren't looking at your videos anymore because of algorithms and AI. There's just so much more content out there that if you're I don't want to say wasting time, but if you're putting your time and talent into making just a funny video about like your clinic culture or just something, and the average patient's not going to watch it. And so if you want to be successful going forward, you have to put your time and talents into what matters most. And where I've seen it have the greatest dividends is creating a work culture. So a really good example, and this is another thing, you don't have to be have a large following to be successful. My favorite one is PT Evolution. They're out of Tahoe in California, and they have around 2 to 4,000 followers, but they have 0 turnover in their clinic in the last 5 years, which is a huge problem in our industry.
Tell us about that more, about the
Yes.
turnover.
So clearly, and this is not just in the physical therapy space, this affects, all rehab therapists, physicians, doctors, they're leaving the space at a greater rate. And even, you could even look at myself. Yes, I'm non-clinical right now, but I still have an active license. And, I'm always, if there was a really good clinical opportunity, I could go back. But the average lifespan of a career right now is 7 years. There are more people walking away than ever before because of the high costs of education, and maybe a private practice owner can only pay you as a DPT coming out of school maybe 85,000, but with cost of inflation, people are struggling to make their payments. And so you have to find this is especially in private practice, you have to have a culture of flexibility or unique opportunities, and you have to promote that to attract talent, because there are hundreds and thousands of clinics clamoring for the same 40 kids coming out of a new cohort, every 2 years per school. So it's just getting more competitive. And in a competitive space, you have to be more actionable and targeted with how you position yourself in the market. And so that's what's just going on right now.
That is so true, Kylie. So how, like, I think the most important thing to map out here is how do we even define culture? So these organizations, everybody's virtue signaling that we have culture, but nobody actually knows how to define it
Yeah,
consistently, right? So what's your consistent definition?
exactly. And unfortunately, it's kind of like by the proof is in the pudding, and their culture has to be, I would call it, some people call it connection or community. Part of it is what I think for the younger generation is how well do you connect to flexibility of schedule, flexibility of payment, and maybe even flexibility of extracurricular activities. So whether that's, some people define it like as cash-based services, but some of it can be programs. So again, I'm going to go back to my little example in Tahoe, but I'll talk about a few examples in New England that I like as well. But the people in Tahoe, what they do is they talk about how, it's a very outdoor community. It's based in a population where people are constantly coming in, they're rock climbing, they're skiing, they're doing all sorts of things. And what they'll do is they have different people that come in and work for them, but they'll have a side gig of, hey, I teach avalanche safety. And they're getting extra patience, community awareness, and something that they're passionate about, which is skiing. Or there was a rock climber that was like, hey, I'm really passionate about grip strength and, just general upper body strength with climbing. And so he was like, great, you can buy whatever extra equipment you want to train climbers. And so he has a climbing corner that does, any type of, wrist, hand, shoulder, extra things to help them be safer while they're doing, they're trailing up. And they will have people reach out to them on Instagram saying, I love what you're doing. I love your clinic. I'm very passionate about this sport or this outdoor activity. I want to work for you. And they're like, great, we'll work with you. We can't pay you as much because of our setup. But if you want to be our water safety expert, you can come be our water safety expert. And so that's really cool. And so I love that example. Another example, if you go over to like New England, I love everything that like Rehab to Perform is doing, or Next Level Physical Therapy, where they're very content driven, but they have so much freedom with their therapists where they can do content, they can do funnier things that obviously come within an umbrella of boundaries that are very well set with, these are our expectations, this is how we communicate to our population, this is what we expect, but there's so much leeway for them to grow and build something. There is a gentleman, let's see, that works for Rehab to Perform. I don't have his name right now, but he got so well known and from just posting on like TikTok, Instagram. He has a full on shoe deal now. That,
Interesting.
yeah, for that he could sponsor, because if you're a therapist, you're standing, your shoes matter. And so now he's making extra side money with deals, sponsorship deals. And there's just so much creativity there, and you just have to be creative as an owner. I also heard a clinic owner the other day, and he found a way through different tax acts and different things that are being proposed by legislature. He can match, okay, and even like a payment back program for student loans. So not only are you getting paid salary, but he found a way to help pay back and support his people pay off their student loans earlier. And that's what you have to do to stand out in this industry.
What do you think? It is very true. I think that you're very good at observing this, and that this is so consistent that there's two-step process, right? There's a signal and then there's noise. And so the people that know how to amplify the signal are the people that you're referencing that have a TikTok that has a message that resonates with everyone else. And others are more focused on vapor and noise. So what is the substance of the signal that helps people resonate to attract young professionals to your organization? What would you say are the three steps to create this amplified signal?
I think you have to be self-aware and you need to know who you're wanting to target. If you are wanting to target the youngest generation, like newest students coming out of DPT programs, when you look at the typical age range, I mean, it can be anywhere as low as 23 years old to maybe 28 years old. They're going to be more, TikTok, Instagram. If you're wanting to look for maybe a little more seasoned, you're going to, wanting a little more millennial type clinicians, that's going to be more Instagram, LinkedIn. And not only once you identify that target market, it's like, how do you talk to them? There are so many new grads on TikTok that want to document their journey. And so that's why it's hard to connect with them, because when you have 10,000 students, SPTs, documenting their journey on TikTok, you have to find a way and you have to research on how do the algorithms work. Do you have a money reserve to boost posts? Organic days are kind of gone, and you need to know what your message is. So if your message is like, hey, we have this great clinic, we treat a niche population, and then that's the other thing, is you need to know who you're serving, and it has to be as targeted as possible. You can't serve everyone and attract these very dedicated grad students. They need to know who they're serving and what they're passionate about. And they also know too that they need to be more targeted than ever. The ones that you want to be as dedicated know that they have to be locked in. And so it's a mixture of messaging, niche, using the right platforms, and consistency and quality. You can't just take a phone and film something funny. You know, are you putting in time and effort? I saw a clinic where the head clinic director, he made it was very resemblant of The Office. He made jokes, he had certain cuts and views where it was like literally watching an Office episode, but it was in the clinic, and I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. And I was like,
Wow.
I would work for that clinic because of the creativity in making something so relatable that works. I mean, everyone loves The Office, so take something talking about paper, but put it talking about PT, and it shows that authenticity and creativity. And that's what people want. They want creativity, authenticity. They don't want to just stand around, see 4 patients an hour, document, and get out.
Well, they're
Yeah.
connecting with something, right? That these are clinic owners recognizing that these, highly educated folks want to have some agency and autonomy over their career, on top of wanting to promote that positive culture. And I mean, I agree with you. I feel like, I didn't know this is the first time I'm hearing that there is so much less ability to organically grow now. It makes sense, I guess, right? In the age of AI. Alex and I talked about recently around, instead of a productivity, like a number of patients to see per day or per week, clinic owners offering some agency to their therapist by saying the productivity can be around relative value units, which then allows a therapist to think more strategically about things like, well, an evaluation is, 5 times the RVU weight of Therax. So if I see more patients for evaluations, that's a total fewer patients I have to see per week. And it's exercising my much higher cognitive skill level and judgment of a doctoring profession. And so it's funny that there's so much of that, right? So we're seeing so much more that you're pointing out of, offering more agency and autonomy and a positive work culture. But imagine if we took this low hanging, your doctoring professionals, just like a physician in a physician practice, and we're going to establish for you a goal for your productivity, maybe establishing bonuses around that, and allow you then to decide from a more strategic standpoint and use that part of your skill set and brain, and all of those things create that environment where, especially if you're on the earlier side to do it, you combine all of these things, that turnover just drops, and this begins to heal. There's that, like, healing the profession, which is what we talk about a lot, I think, as a theme, is going to take these multifaceted approaches. So I hope that folks hear your message. We need to build a different culture for therapists and heal the profession. It has to start at the therapist level. That's what was jumping up for me here.
I actually saw a study done this week where new physicians, and the average, MD, they're doing like 12 plus years of school. If you're a new grad, less than 3 to 5 years out in the profession, the leave rate is between 5 to 7%, which is a huge jump from a year and a half ago, which is 3%. So you have young MDs that, I mean, you've almost doubled your percentage, 3 to 6% in a year and a half of them almost immediately leaving less than 4 years. And they tied it back mostly from them not having the ability to make decisions according to the best, like what they think is the best for their patient. So they're just walking away because they're like, I have all this debt and it's not paying back. And that makes me really sad. If I put 12 plus years and was like, I'm out in less than 3 years, that
Yeah.
is a huge problem.
Well, I think there's a couple of things to dig into here. And one is that we see economics as only financial economics. There's also time economics. And so the time invested is not always valuable. And so people see time investment never equated to financial investment only unless a tuition or reimbursement is involved. But time in principle invested into any modality, any clinical operation, it has the same value or even greater value because time is a resource that cannot be recouped. Once you put the time into anything, that is the time that is gone. Like finances can be recouped because you can extract additional value from different services. Time is gone. So when you're referencing that the time that these people put into their field of expertise, that's really important to appreciate, both from a physician side, but also on a PT side. The other thing that I think, Kylie, have stumbled upon is really important, which is a growth opportunity in a traditional healthcare model is usually multifaceted and multimodal. So you can have a physician that grows clinically, operationally, administratively. You can have a physician that goes into research, the physician that goes into policy. Physical therapy as a industry has historically only provided two opportunities for growth. One opportunity was to grow clinically. So you keep adding extra certificates after your name until you run out of space in your business card. And the other way is to grow administratively. And administratively is that after you go to a certain level of operational finesse, you start managing others and then you leave clinical care. And we're the only industry rewards productivity by actually taking you out of the clinical setting. So we reward good clinicians by taking them out of being clinicians, which is stupid, right? But we don't have a third chapter of growth. We never developed this third arm where I can be a good clinician and a good administrator, and I can still develop and actualize myself by doing X. And what you're defining is that the actualization through performative arts, through performance, through social media, through signaling, which is important because this gives the clinicians an opportunity to still grow through messaging their source of need. To throw it back to you, there's a concept called the first principles. So the first principles are the foundational truths. So as being humans, we have these first principles that define us who we are. And the way the first principles are defined is that they're not negotiable, or they're mechanistically true regardless of what you say. And they're independent of your process or independent of your culture. So my first principle is gravity. I know I'm not going to collapse underground because gravity is going to keep me here. So what do you think are these first principles of the cohort of people you're describing, these new clinicians, that anyone in the industry can take on and say, I'm going to take this first principle of this new graduate physical therapist and apply it to foundational knowledge so that I can actually help these young clinicians actualize?
That's a great question. With younger cohort, this younger cohort, they love to talk and they love to share their experience. So the first one I would say is you need to allow them the opportunity to share their experience authentically. Now, obviously, you need to put boundaries around that. Like, obviously, you can't have a clinician come on that's like swearing, be like, oh, this one patient, and break HIPAA protocols. That's never going to happen. They need to share what they're seeing and they need to share their ideas on how to improve it. Now, that can come in many forms, whether it's through education or through funnier videos to share their experience to maybe improve processes or even to do things that improve other clinicians' lives, like the shoe deal, which having better shoes or even advocating for the best shoes possible for physical therapists is important because so many people right now do focus on like nursing, like Figs with their scrubs. They make it for the nurses. Hoka, they make shoes for nurses. They don't really tailor anything for physical therapists. There's not a certain look, shoe, and we're moving around. You have to sometimes, if you're working in a pediatric setting, you have to roll around, you're working with kids. And so you might wear scrubs, which is again, a nursing tool that's been made for nurses, but it's not made necessarily for physical therapists.
Yeah. I think
And
20 years
so,
ago, you would be like khakis and a polo shirt.
exactly. And I don't
It's the
know
last thing
any,
I wore as a therapist.
Khakis and a polo
exactly, and
shirt.
polo companies that have actually, partnered with physical therapists. Cause I mean, that right there, you could You have
Mhm.
a hard market right there.
Guys, we
Yeah.
got a product to develop here.
Yeah, merchandising, like, well, flexible polos that help you roll around.
And I have seen some idealization of there will be some that want to get into products, but the problem is they only make products to help patients. I have rarely seen products made to help therapists, physical products, whether it's, your own pain or operation. Like, yes, there are software companies that, they can sell things, but rarely is it homegrown. Rarely are even the vendors making things by therapists for therapists. Now, there are some companies that do, but I'm saying at large, not as many. So that's number one, is you got to allow them creativity to express themselves. The second one, they have kind of dark humor, which means that the only way that they're moving through this life right now and dealing with constant policy changes and things going on in the clinic is they have humor. So there has to be a level of connection through something really funny that even brings their eyes to social media. The average person goes to social media for one thing, which is honestly to get away and to laugh. And then you tie in either a product, an ad, or a message at the end. I would say social media is the new TV, but it takes no subscription model. Most of my friends my age don't even post about themselves anymore. It's more about which entertainers do you follow. And these entertainers can be regular people that have, set out and done unique things. I follow a guy, he changed his life because he went skateboarding in Idaho Falls and would drink a can of ocean spray to it's a 60s band,
Mhm.
Fleetwood Mac. He got a
Mhm.
sponsorship deal with Ocean Spray, and he's known as the Ocean Spray skateboarding 70s music loving guy. And he's made tons of content going to different skate parks, just skating around Idaho with his cranberry juice and his 70s music. And he was able to buy a whole new trailer living situation for him and his daughter.
That's so awesome. I think I need to look into like Depend as a personal sponsor. Depend and like a prune juice for constipation.
All I'm saying is it's all about being the most niche, most random, the most funny, and you're there to entertain. You entertain first, and then at the end, there's either an education or a pain point that you bring through humor. And if you just go purely to educate anymore, you're going to get missed. You're not going to grow organically.
So I can give you like a couple of different personal insights. One, my 19-year-old daughter came back from college. She's a first year college freshman, and so she is a TikTok connoisseur.
Mm-hmm.
She has been on TikTok, I think. She is the original TikToker. So I track her evolution of her consumption of TikTok. And when she was leaving for college, she had enough patience to scroll through that 30-second video. Now she comes in and every 3 seconds she just flips and likes. So the conversation is like, Michelle, why, like, you liked it. You didn't even see the full substance. She's like, well, I like the TikToker. I don't really need to see the video. So
Exactly. It's personality, and when you follow someone, you copy them. And also attention spans are coming down, and that is one of the harder
now,
parts. I mean, we're focusing on the 20-year-olds. The 20-year-olds have better attention span than those in the teens. That's a whole different apocalyptic view that we could talk about on a different day.
well, so I think that's the other part. So me being in academia, right? Like, so me teaching, I also look into kids that look into the information, and then part of, I think, innate human intelligence is the ability to hold a concept for extended period of time. And I do think this is me, the dinosaur, like griping. Inability to hold an idea or concept for extended period of time, that continuous flux actually creates a void in substantiation. So,
Mm.
and I think that there's the possibility of a positive proxy for this evolution is that you are able to hold multiples of an idea, not because you're always changing, but it's Scott Fitzgerald quote, right, about like that the true sign of intelligence is being able to hold conflicting ideas for a long period of time. I think that's evolving and that's changing based on my small sample of my own immediate environment. So how do you think we can combine the best of both worlds? How can we combine this attention economy that you're describing for social media, but also combine with the need for, I think, just the human element? Human psyche and human intelligence is not designed for that level of diversity. The
Yes.
distraction actually Like we can't multitask. Humans physically can't multitask. We can single task and switch. So I think the switching is actually something that is improved. I think the new generation can switch between tasks in a fraction of a second. My generation takes like 45 minutes to switch, so that because I have to go for a walk, right? So
And
how do we work
exactly.
with, like, or how do we build on it, but still instill that old model where the ability to hold this concept for a long period of time actually can help ferment, right? It's like making fine wine. Young wine is nasty because like it just started fermenting, like, and that quick idea, it will give you a quick buzz because it's young wine, but it doesn't give you the depth or the substance. The ability to hold the information longer is what makes wine wine. It's what gives it character, gives it taste, gives it personality. And so these ideas also, if you're always switching, you're never letting it ferment to the point where it actually has character and personality. So what do you think of that?
I do think for any, let's say whether you're a clinic or a overarching owner that's trying to attract talent, there is a level of morality and boundaries that you need to. I've noticed because you can always sell yourself to social media. It's not that hard. You could set boundaries and just start posting as fast as possible, putting a ton of money and getting attention, but it doesn't mean you're providing anything of value. And you could also be contributing to decreased attention instead of actually increasing. And so there is that hard fine line of, how can I help, but how can I attract? And that's why I'm like, we need to focus less on patients and more on therapists, because if you focus on patients, you're never going to catch up, because then you need the 10 to 15-second videos. You need the crazy production and all of the, doodads and whistles to attract attention nowadays, which therapists really don't have. Versus therapists, they're a little bit older. They are looking for different things algorithmically. Because the only reason a patient is going to see your video on social media is if they're like, hey, I got injured. Like, let's say you have an 18-year-old. He knows from maybe like a athletic trainer at school that he hurt his rotator cuff. Maybe he might search rotator cuff, exercises. And then he'll pull up, anything from 500 different options, and the ability for your video to be in the top 25 options for him to maybe do some rotator cuff is very low, especially when you're competing against someone like a squat university who's got 4.5 million followers. The algorithm's going to push his video first. And so don't worry on that. Focus on who's local, what's your niche community, what's your culture, and then make insightful videos. Like maybe you're taking something around your clinic, showing your clinic, talking about your values. You could make something funny about, I struggled with this patient, but this is how I handled it, being authentic to that. And then there has to be some kind of hook tie in at the end about, whatever it might be. And you asked a question, but the problem is I don't think there is a way to reteach therapists how to hold value in social media right now, unless you're doing something like this, where it's more of a podcast, longer setting where they can actually sit down and hold a thought. The traditional model right now in social media, like on an Instagram or a TikTok or even Facebook, it's a quick hit. And so your quick hit has to deliver a message short. Now, if you bring them in and they want to learn more, because I think humans, we do want to get better and grow, and you want those type of humans in your clinic, they're going to want to listen to the longer, things. Long form YouTube is actually growing algorithmically right now. So do you have a YouTube video of your clinic or of your clinicians doing something outside of the clinic that maybe might interest other people? That's how you could hold value. Are you doing maybe it doesn't have to be a very long producing podcast, but having a few episodes matters, just little things like that. And so I know it doesn't quite answer your question, because I think it's impossible to teach to get attention and to hold value. But I do think you can use a different multifaceted approach to get attention to your clinic or your practice. I think you can educate, but they live separately on your platforms. And I will say that a pet peeve of mine when I've been researching the industry is the amount of clinics that cannot properly attach their social media pages to their website. If
They
I could
can't
just
do it?
take they can't I don't you would be surprised the amount of basic clinics like, obviously, if you're a high functioning clinic, they've gotten to the point they can't do that. But if you're, less than 2 practices, less than 10 clinicians, the amount of websites where it'll have the icons of Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and you click it, and it doesn't take you anywhere, or it'll take you to the wrong page, or their Google business profile won't pull up correctly, it's astronomically high. And I'm like, the average physical therapist owner, we need to start at the basics. Can you actually search on Google? Is your Google business profile attached to your website correctly? Do you have socials? Are your socials properly connected on the website? If we just fix that, even as a community first and then built on creativity, we would have outstanding results because we are functioning that low. And so, yes, you can look at some high performers, but that is 0.5% of what actually exists. The top, the bottom half of that bell curve doesn't even have their socials connected correctly.
Well, how do we change it then? How do we correct it?
Things like this. And I also love, there are PTs that do marketing that have brought value and actualized themselves to teach others how to market. So I'm a big fan of Neil Trickett and everything he's doing in Virginia with like practice promotions. I think and he does basic, simple things that, and obviously he is a vendor. You can use him to teach you how to market. But the average physical therapist, when you talk to them, they're like, hey, we need help with marketing. We only know how to do clinical stuff, which looking back at my health education experience, I could tell you everything about the human body, anatomy. They made me do physics, but I didn't have a single business class. It wasn't until I had my current job where I retroactively had to go back and then learn about marketing. And so it's going to be slow, but we have to do more education, but we have to do more applicable short education. Like, hey, as a group today, if you have a website of any, let's go on YouTube. Let's learn how to properly connect your socials to your website. Ask questions. If you can't, hire someone who is a marketer. And there are so many freelancers in this gig economy that for $2,000 to $5,000 could set up a page search with some basic SEO to bring more eyes to your website, and then make sure you're easily connected, and then you're either doing ads or something like that. Like, just get creative, ask questions, and we need to look outside of our community. We are too focused on physical therapists and only talking to clinicians, when the best and the most successful private practices that I have been talking to are the ones that go to other tech conferences that are not healthcare
Yep.
related, but then take that information and knowledge and say it is healthcare, it's just packaged differently.
Of course.
So you have to have an open enough mind to realize the amount of knowledge out there that could directly impact your business to be more successful. Could be in a social media influencer space, or it could be in, digital marketing, or it could be in like even just like tech software development, and then just retroactively apply. Everything applies. And we just got to change our focus of, I'm a clinician. I treat people. I don't sell. I don't market. That doesn't exist anymore. And anyone who does focus on that is going to struggle not only with patients, referrals, they're going to struggle with converting, having people show up, completed plans of care. It takes the whole process. And so we focus on the basics at the beginning. Who are you? What's your messaging? What's your niche? How can we help you? And then how do you target those people? How do you communicate with those people? And how do you get the best clinicians that want to deal with that demographic? And if you start at the foundation, everything else will follow. As long as you're willing to learn and always ask questions and be like, how about this process? How about this process? How about that? We don't ask enough. We're too busy trying to get patients in, charge my units, and then, get the next patient in. And I'm like, the best practice owners look at systems and processes. The ones that want to treat and only look at billing units and patients will not succeed in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right on. It's also, you almost have to open up the value that people have. There's a really good book, and I would reference this time and time again. The book is like a 60-year-old work by the psychiatrist. His name's Eric Byrne, and it's called Games People Play. And it's essentially a social role play. So you have to think of the directionality of how people assume these functional roles in the clinic, that I just want to come and treat patients. Now, that is a game that you play because that social role play has been assigned to you by your employer or your administrator or whoever it is, and it becomes your fundamental truth because you don't understand the nature of what else is available. So part of the heuristic, I think what you're describing, Kylie, is that you can take agency in your own performance, and so when you go to the clinic, your performance can go beyond this very linear monochrome performance of just treating patients to being a promoter. But there's a caveat that in a social media world or in a clinical world or anywhere else, the dimensions and the density of your expertise has to be substantiated by your knowledge and your awareness of your surrounding. And I think that here, if somebody becomes a self-promoter and the focus is on promotion or on social media content, that focus is taken away from the clinical side. And again, this is that old dinosaur shaking the fist at the sky, that clinician needs to work for the entire clinical career to substantiate their knowledge, because knowledge evolves and you have to adapt to that knowledge. Our attention has a limited bandwidth. And if your attention is placed on how do I promote this, you're taking attention away from how do I improve my own performance. And so we need to balance this, me, the social being, and me, the clinician, the professional. And each domain needs to grow independently. So you can only promote substance that you generate from your knowledge. And I'll shut up here.
No, you're good. I completely agree. The hardest part, I would say, in even modern society is balance and finding balance. Some would even argue that balance is actually not attainable. It's a matter of priority. And so the question is, what is the priority of you as an individual and then as a clinic? And the problem is that you see in social media so often, if you talk to the average fifth grader and you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? The most common answer is an influencer and a YouTube creator. It's not a doctor. It's not a police officer. It's a content creator. And that's what's happening in the world is people do know that there's so much economic opportunity to come from social media and so much freelancing and opportunity to not be in the typical grind of wake up, work 9 to 5, go to bed. But the problem is our economy is not based off of everyone being a content creator. It can't support itself. We need both. And so the only thing I could, implore is if you do have a clinic that wants to grow and wants a better content strategy or even a better recruiting strategy, you need to identify the talent that wants to make it a priority. Because again, balance is hard, especially when we're trying to balance more things than ever before. And I would argue it's not achievable. But if you have, let's say, if you have a clinic, you have 18 people under it, find 2 that want to use it. I would call it, and we have to repackage, unfortunately, and relabel. I would call it a side quest. Make social media your side quest of, you could either be a clinician, front desk, doesn't matter. But how are you going to package whatever the vision is of the clinic? And let's talk about it. Let's make content around it. And we're going to set aside time and financial resources for you to learn more about it, to actualize about it, and then go that way. And you might have to, that there is a risk that maybe you have a clinician that does so well and loves it so much that maybe they do something else. Maybe they do want to make it that new clothing polo line we were talking about for physical therapists. And great, I would say that they actually went their whole journey. But I still think that's what needs to happen. You need to identify a few, make it their side quest, give them time and a little bit of financial support, and then allow it to happen under an agreed umbrella of messaging and boundaries, and then grow. But not everyone is going to have that balance. And I think some people are still going to be on the other side of wanting to be a clinician and treat. Great. You can still be featured in the videos. You can still have an experience and grow that. But I don't think you can balance it unless it's your priority as a side quest to grow it.
I like
And
that.
that's the unfortunate reality of what it is. I don't think I have seen someone in the industry perfectly balance it. they go one way or the other. It's very much a tipping balance. The owners that are more that might have over 60,000 followers, they're more in the business side and they're treating less, but then they'll have social media. Or maybe there might be some that are treating and have really good content, have 30,000 followers. They're still treating 80% and then doing 20% social media. I have not seen a 50-50 yet, but you could take a few and give them the opportunity and then grow that.
Maybe the message here to business owners is to realize that for everyone you hire, many of them have things that excite them and make them feel like they have autonomy over their career and keep them engaged and motivated to do the clinical work if you recognize, if you act interested in what else they care about, and then recognize that there are things that could matter to them. And there's actually ways to, besides just, seeing it as a way to retain them and keep them happy, there's also
Agree.
ways to say, to your point about, well, there's a risk if someone is really successful at this and then they get this brand deal. Well, when you start to see that someone has that great potential, try to get into a partnership with them, develop a separate, throwing this out there, but like a separate contract where you help fund their growth to X amount of dollars. And then you reap the benefits of the growth of the business that they build alongside you as a new trajectory, right, for that person's career. That also becomes a new trajectory for the business. Like I think business owners are so top down in the therapy space. And therapists, for whatever reason, maybe it's different with the newer DPTs graduating, but they're just so okay with giving up all of that agency that they, at least, I imagine that agency that you think, well, I have a doctoral degree, I should have that autonomy that I see my physician friends have, but then it becomes squashed. And they just, to your game theory point, they just change. They just accept this. And that can rot someone's motivation and insides. And then it starts, I would imagine, starts to take away hope that there's something better. So instead of thinking about, well, maybe there's something better in my own career and there's other ways to use my knowledge and partner with the owner of the business, they think about, how do I completely get out of this and into something else where I may have that potential? So I think what we're partly talking about is all these are great ideas, but we almost have to reach business owners to say, look, there's a paradigm shift here. And there's examples like you brought up of therapy clinic owners who see this and are giving us a roadmap. And those early innovators to kind of open your eyes and pay attention to what they're doing and start to think about, I may have 100 clinics, but how do I pilot some ideas in 10% of them? Identify those therapists that have frank conversations with them. Are there other things you're looking for? And then find something that works for both of you. So why do you think therapy owners are so stuck in this top-down way of thinking?
So I actually love. I think that's one of the reasons why it's a privilege, Dana. Is like you put a perfect 2-sentence synthesis into this content. It's investing into your employees and investing into your coworkers. That investment does not have to be financial, but it has to be an investment of time and interest. And are you investing enough time and interest into people who you're working with, especially your younger clinicians? And are you creating a third coast of actualization that goes beyond administrative or clinical growth, which is what this describes? So yeah, this is great.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you were saying. It's just a matter of again, you have to take a moment to pause and get out of survival mode. The traditional reimbursements are low, so I have to have this many patients and to be able to cover my costs. And that means we have to see 3 patients an hour. And you get into the hamster wheel versus taking a break, reinvesting, looking at operations and different models to supplement other, like the traditional model, to give you that time back to have other opportunities. And there are so many opportunities out there. That's the one thing I've learned with this job. There are people that create amazing side opportunities for revenue and attracting patients. There are some that really go into the retail side with selling hyperice or theraguns that are bringing back a percentage through like Amazon sales. So there's the retail pipeline, there's the the side service programs, there's brand deals and social media. There's so much creativity, there's so much opportunity, and I would even say that now is one of the best times to be a physical therapy owner. There's a lot of optimism in the industry, but there's only optimism if you're willing to try something new and be creative and break from the traditional thinking models and learn from other ecosystems. And here's the thing, as someone again who my whole job is literally to sit back and I watch the therapy industry from, like, behind the curtains. The most optimistic people and the people that have that mindset of there's so much opportunity, there's so much to be gained, are actually the ones that always succeed, that always perform. I mean, it's like watching your favorite sports team, some of those stars have a totally different mentality, and no matter the obstacle, they rise above and win. There are physical therapy owners, clinic owners that have that different mentality that are winning, and nothing stops them. And I've seen it time and time again. So if you're in that different mindset, if your mindset is not optimistic, it doesn't matter what you implement.
I think that's a perfect closure. I think it's that this is there's no better time than now. And I think Kylie, thank you for being this agent of development that is pushing this idea out there. I really hope that your brand will help us expand the future proof PT concept. But I also hope that you are the future. You're the present and the future. And so being optimistic but being realistic and actually working on self actualization is the only way to thrive in this community. So thank you for what you do, Kylie, and thank you for driving the force forward.
Yes, thank you. And I will try. I'm still learning and it's fun.